Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast, the Honest CEO's Guest Series Special Edition. In this series, we are going to be talking to some incredible female founders about their journey, what really goes on behind the scenes, how much balance they have, what makes their business joyful, and ultimately what keeps them going. So feel free to tune in and we will see you each week. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast in our Guest CEO series. Today we are joined by Alex Fearon, who is a strategic marketer and founder of the Maybe Later, a consultancy that helps purpose-driven businesses design marketing journeys their customers actually enjoy and the teams can actually manage. She's known for making strategy feel simple, useful and human, binning the jargon and overcomplication that often makes marketing feel harder than it needs to be. Alex got her start agency side, working at a brilliant female-founded agency that shaped a lot of her thinking and how powerful lead marketing can be, and how important it is to build a business that supports your well-being and not burns you out. She also had a stint in luxury retail, learning how to storytell and how service can create powerful brand connections. And finally, she led a marketing team at a tech for good firm where she went solo mid-pandemic in 2020 and has been building her agency ever since. I am so excited for Alex to come and talk to us today because she is the creator of the Align framework, which is a practical mapping framework that brings together audience insight, content strategy, and business goals in a way that makes strategic planning actually useful, rather than something that just sits in a folder and never gets seen to again. So all of her work is really grounded in the belief that ethical, effective marketing doesn't have to just mean more complexity. It just means more clarity, more empathy, and more intention. And that is why today's conversation, I think, is going to be a real game changer if you're listening and you are really ready to refresh things and build a different way of looking at your marketing and maybe how your business operates. So, Alex, welcome to the Honest Business Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited. Also, can you do all my intros and pitches from now on? It was perfect.
I am so excited to have you here today because I feel like we've got a lot of things to talk about that are really relevant for this year and the next kind of 18 to 24 months and how we see business and client acquisition and trend and marketing going. So to kick things off, what is one thing that you wish all business owners knew?
My one thing is that every single business has a customer journey, whether you've mapped it or not. And that really comes from this idea that I think, well, number one, every single client is moving through a journey from being a stranger to your business or your service to not just being a client, but being a loyal brand advocate. And I don't know where this perception came from, actually probably big tech. And they've made journey mapping feel really out of reach and overcomplicated. And so I think a lot of SMEs don't intentionally map that stuff. And it's actually meant that their journey is just being left to chance. And when you frame it like that, I think it makes a lot of business owners go, oh, like I wouldn't expect someone to try and get somewhere without a map or without giving them like a pin on Google Maps. But that's what we're doing when we don't map our customer journeys.
Yes. And this is, I think, where the whole confusion has come from. Because I guess some people might tune into this and you're thinking, wow, we've only just gotten into the podcast and we're not starting with all these like mediocre kind of questions. And we're saying, okay, what is this actually about? And I think for some people, they have really assumed that customer journey and customer experience are the same thing. And I think there's this connection point of that just means operations, which I know you have so many thoughts on. So do you want to just give us a kind of definition, rundown of, you know, what customer journey actually is and what does it mean for SMEs?
So on kind of its most simple form, it's how do people get from not knowing about your business or your brand to being a client, and how do you retain them, really importantly. And when you're looking at journey mapping, you're looking at the most important driver is emotion, because we all, even in B2B, we make decisions based on emotion. And so journey mapping helps you figure out what people are feeling at each of those steps, and then what you need to tell them, so that's your messaging, and when and how, that's your tactical level, so that they get to know you and become the types of customers that you want as well. And I think that's, one of the pieces that I think gets missed out a lot.
Yeah. And so what would you say is that combination of, what's the differentiator between the customer journey and then client experience? Because as we mentioned, I think that's where the confusion starts to set in for people, and they think, oh, I'm just trying to, better our customer service or something like that. Whereas your approach is vastly different and zooms out, I think, really quite far.
Yeah. I'll start with the customer experience piece, because I think particularly if you're a service-based SME, when we think of customer experience, we think of customer service. And so we think about these really admin-driven things. And I think a real trend that you can obviously see at the minute is AI chatbots, regardless of the type of business that you have, AI agents to help process like any tickets or queries. And when we think about designing intentional customer service or customer experience, those are the only bits that kind of come to mind. And it becomes incredibly, traditionally, really separated from how we conceptualize and bring our marketing to life. And I think for me, why it's so important to combine the two is, we'd love it if everyone just went from step 1 to step 2 to step 3 and no one had any questions or queries or changed their minds based on what was happening in work or, whatever it might be. But we're complex. We're people are messy. And so customer journey mapping helps you, again, tap into that emotional piece, kind of client facing, but then also in the back end helps you, if you do it properly, see what systems and processes you need to make that journey kind of come to life. And also, more importantly, how to support your team to help them bring that journey to life. And customer experience is completely weaved throughout. And it's even small things like, how are you approaching your onboarding? How do you wrap up a project? And how are you thinking about how you tap into what your ideal clients, believe in? What are their values? What are motivating them to work with you? And that's where, that customer experience and customer journey piece become something actually useful.
So I feel like this is all really leaning into building a picture for founders, for CEOs, for directors watching who are thinking, okay, I get what this picture is and what we're building here. Do you want to go a step further into just explaining almost like a use case or a pitch, if you would, for leaders as to why this should be something maybe on their radar for the next 12 months, or something that's because I think it's a great activity for so many teams to get involved with, which I know you're very passionate about. And I think that's something that often as leaders, as CEOs, it's like, there's this thing of like, okay, well, what project fits in what department and what kind of moves and who's responsible. But I think this is a really interesting whole business kind of capacity that people can get really excited about. Do you want to just touch on maybe like an example or kind of anecdotes, because I know you have so many, about how that's really helped leaders and their teams?
I'm going to set the scene with just a couple of things that I love people to think about, and then I'll give an example. And the first one is that when we look at how we plan our marketing, our ops, and our sales, they are, even if we're a team of 1 or 2, they're so internally siloed. And it's maybe because of how we set up our Trello boards or our Google Drive folders, or just because it's such a big hangover from big corporate, and everything operates in those silos. And that's not being audience-led. And so, number one, this exercise helps you kind of be able to interrogate those internal silos, because I think we sometimes forget that our clients, they don't care if you're marketing and someone else is an account manager or whatever that piece is. That's not how they experience working and kind of engaging with you as a business and as a brand. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that we know that whatever industry you're in, like social media, marketing, email, it's a really crowded landscape. And we have to focus on retention. And I think for a really long time, all of our marketing budget has gone into acquisition. And obviously we know that that beginning part of the journey is super important, but it costs more to acquire a new customer than it does to retain them. And I think it's because when we think about, or let's say if you're a founder or you're a marketer, and when you started your career and you Googled what makes good marketing, everything was funnel based. And so it's all about like putting as many people as we can into the top of the funnel and seeing what drops out the bottom. And that is no longer sustainable. It hasn't been for a very long time. But I think for how content and marketing is evolving in 2025, and it's only going to, I think, get quicker with AI and these tech advances, retention and that kind of trust building has to become like a key project for your marketing. It can no longer be secondary. So those are the things I'd like people to keep in their minds. Brilliant use case is I worked with 2 co-founders and they lead a leadership skills consultancy. So they work with international nonprofits and councils to navigate periods of change. And they just couldn't figure out why their sales and their marketing just felt like the biggest energy suck. And I hear this all the time. It's like, why does this feel so blooming hard? I feel like we're, whether it's how they were outsourcing to a marketing agency, like everything is so resource intensive and we're just not seeing the results that we want to see.
And I think that's where this kind of frustration ends up getting really kind of detrimental to a business, because we've both seen it where that phase can be a phase that lasts for years and years. This isn't just a few weeks or a few months. Like, it goes on for years and years. Profits affected, opportunities. It's just such a encompassing moment that I think a lot of leaders are like, we are really stuck in this and we can't get out. And I think what you do is fascinating as to the speed of how fast you can lift the lid. So keep going. Sorry for interrupting.
Not at all. And you maybe just, again, just think of something really interesting there, in that when you get stuck in that space, number one, it perpetuates this idea that like marketing doesn't really work, doesn't really do anything. It's just a tick box exercise. And I think firms or businesses that fall into that space, it's because they've been stuck on not knowing how to improve their ROI. So it really perpetuates that. And then I also just think you can lose confidence in the service that you're offering. And I think, and this is your bag, but I feel like when people have been in that marketing trouble space for a while, they do a jerk reaction and launch something new or change their pricing, or because they're realizing that, the only new clients that they're getting are by chance, whether that's a cold lead by chance or an accidental referral because that process hasn't been mapped. Like it fundamentally creates really shaky ground in a business, and it affects, like you said, bottom line, teams, everything. But when you map and you see things from start to finish from that audience-led perspective, you can spot the gaps. You can see why people are dropping off at certain points, whether that's because you're missing a certain level of messaging, or because actually you're behind the scenes, like that ops layer is accidentally dropping people for whatever reason. And you can really quickly plug those gaps. So those 2 co-founders that we worked with, we literally spent a day, giant white wall, and we mapped their existing journey from beginning to end. And we could spot that they, number one, where their energy sinks were personally as co-founders. And we found out that for them, one of them personally, LinkedIn just felt like a huge hurdle, but they absolutely thrived in a networking space. But they weren't making time for it because I think there's this thing of like, oh, we should be doing more of X, Y, Z. So immediately from that mapping process, we could spot, okay, we need to redistribute some resources so that you have more capacity to network. And we're going to give your social team a different brief so that they can carry a bit more of the LinkedIn stuff. And from a content perspective, we realized from mapping their existing kind of content flow that, accidentally, they weren't sharing all of the amazing feedback that they collected because they were just using it internally to refine their business offering. And it sounds so obvious because we all we'll share it. Everyone will share a testimonial and be like, oh, that's so great. But when you tap into what your ideal client is really thinking and what their goals are, you can share feedback form information or whatever it is in a completely different way that directly resonates to them and their goals. And what that does is that it massively speeds up the sales cycle.
And this is what I think is interesting, because I think, well, it's all interesting, but I think this piece about sales cycle, lead time, funnel attrition, kind of funnel leakage is where marketers, sales leaders, business owners, CEOs have got to get really on board with, because that is where your money is just, you're either losing it or you're leaking it or you're doing something with it, but it isn't helping you. And I think what's fascinating about this customer journey work is you can do it to a degree you want to. And I know you're quite passionate about that in the sense of if you want to go the whole hog, you can really go for it. But also you can do lighter touch points that I know you've said to me before has made such a huge difference for clients. And I think that's something that's very hopefully reassuring for people to hear, because actually it is a journey and you can choose how kind of far you want to go down an avenue. Do you have any suggestions if someone's kind of getting on board and they're like, oh, this is interesting? You got any suggestions of like places to start or things to start thinking about?
Ooh, I think if you want a slightly light touch version, one of the things that I always tell people to start with before you do the mapping is actually have a look at how are you onboarding people who sign up for like your general newsletter, because that's the easiest project to start with to see how are you actually moving people from kind of being new to you in your world to being really engaged and ready to take whatever that next action is. So audit that piece, and if you want to go a step further, go and ask your mum or your dad or someone who's really not in your world, sign up. Can you run through the sign up process? And I'm going to check back in with you at the end of the series, and I want to understand what you think we do. Because most people, you get to the end and it's like, I don't actually know what you do or how you help me.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, for so long, I think we sometimes say, okay, we'll do kind of painkiller marketing messaging, but we just talk about what we as businesses do. We don't really center the emotions of our buyers, even in a B2B space. And that becomes one of the reasons why people lag and they drop out the journey, because you're not speaking to them and kind of what they want to do. So light touch version, I'd say have a think about that. And then really importantly, and it's like, it's so small, but I just think the chance for increased revenue is massive. How do you wrap up a project? So number one, from a service perspective, if it fits within the context of your business, obviously you want to be thinking about an upsell or resell, but how do you make sure that you're asking people at the right points to reflect on how the project has gone, to introduce you to someone who would be interested to talk about, and then pull out kind of a key little bit from the project that you worked on? Like, those are the pieces that you can just flowchart really easily, and it means that they become an intentional part of your marketing and kind of your client nurture. And that's the increased revenue from that alone is huge. If you're a bigger organization or you've got teams, and when I say you've got teams, like also you use a freelance team, because massively, I think sometimes we like that maybe later wouldn't exist without the incredible freelancers that we work with.
We love freelance teams.
But it's so easy to almost accidentally keep our freelancers on the outside. But if we got together and mapped a client kind of customer journey, that means that just the level and depth of understanding that they've got about the whole cycle, not just where they fit in, just the kind of the quality of work, but also I just think the joy, because clarity brings joy, right, in your work. So yeah, if you've got a team, it's actually about getting everyone in the same space and I think the first step is asking them, what about, what's in your particular role? Like, do you love that you feel like is working really well? That can be process driven, it could be messaging driven, and to collect those, and you can start to say, okay, where does this fit in on the journey? Is this when someone's quite new, so they've just followed us on LinkedIn, or they just signed up for a lead magnet? Or is this black pocket of good when we're offboarding someone? And you can kind of start to map those out. Then ask people where things aren't going so well. Because that's when you spot the gaps. And from those gaps, that's where you can actually build out the tactical kind of marketing and ops and sales projects that you need to do within a given time. And what I love about that approach is you're not just kind of sticking your finger in the air and saying, oh, well, we probably should do this TikTok thing, or what is everyone else doing? It's what data have we collected from our team as an initial layer to help guide what we're going to tackle next.
And that's powerful. Like, that in itself is huge. So if someone is part of professional services, let's just say maybe they run an amazing accountancy or a really innovative law firm or something in that space, and they're like, do you know what, we do want to differentiate, and maybe their service differentiation is difficult, because let's be honest, in some professional services that is harder than others. Can you talk us through kind of what a more intensive way of looking at customer journey? I know you gave a great example there of like every business could go and do those things you said. For people listening who are sort of like thinking, right, okay, well, we've already done, maybe they've done it, maybe they're sat there going, well, we've done that and we've done this. Tell us more about kind of what it can look like and is kind of how detailed it can go. Because I think sometimes for people to see that picture, it's quite exciting, because I think people have an image in their head as to what that might be, but actually you have done some fantastic stuff of going, zooming in, zooming out, macro, micro. It's really interesting.
So I'll start with the zooming out piece. So if you really feel like you've got a great marketing strategy, content strategy, amazing SOPs, your ops is brilliant, where does all of this information live? How does someone actually get a holistic picture of a customer journey? And for me, that's where our Align framework comes in. And that's where you've got to make sure that you're looking at your audience, your logistics, your insights, your goals, whether it's 2 layers, your business goals and what the goals are of your clients of each step, and then how you nurture them throughout that whole process. So it's collecting all of this amazing strategic work that you've already done and plotting it on one map that becomes a North Star for how you take someone from being a stranger to being a long-term and valuable client. It's such a huge piece of the puzzle because everything is so segmented. So there's that piece, so the big zooming out and collating piece. And then if you're in professional services or something that's hard to market, the first place that I'd tell you to zoom in on is marketing to your existing client base. Because we spend so much time and energy getting everyone, and we get them to that finish line. And then I sometimes think, especially in, like, let's say, for example, accounting, we feel like they're over the dotted line. We know that we're going to do our client's tax return every year for the rest of the time. So they're kind of in. And we'll just send them a newsletter every now and again. But there's so much missed opportunity there. And when you do things from an audience-led perspective, you start to understand how what you offer as a business fits into the goals of your ideal client. Also, as an individual, like who within an organization is a stakeholder that you're actually engaging with? Does that mean that your client marketing could share information that eventually helps your client position themselves to get a promotion? Those are the things that take your marketing from a tick box exercise to a strategic revenue generating tool. Because when you help a client feel like understood and seen, And I can't stress enough, like, this is for B2B. I don't want someone to like skip forward on the podcast and go, oh, but I don't do B2C. Like, this is so applicable to B2B.
This is like the key, isn't it?
It's
This is the thing that
massively-
we're all like, come on, like, get on board with. You cannot keep running from. Like, you have to feel in with this idea and this ideology.
Absolutely. Because when you shift your marketing to focus on that piece, and when you look at things from an audience-led and an emotion-led way, that person will be a fan of your business and your brand for forever.
Yeah. And when we look at numbers, I think let's just say, like, numbers-wise for people, if you are a professional service firm somehow, you know, some sort of capacity, and let's say you're already turning over 500 grand a year, or you make $1 million a year, there is an easy £200,000 that you can add in revenue to your business just by sorting the advocacy piece out, in my opinion, I think. And you could consistently add that on every 12 months if you actually had it in a real structured way, let alone add in any other new services or other ways or tweaking or even sorting top of funnel. If you just sort that advocacy piece out, it's like, whoa, so much easier. And that trust piece you said is completely missing so much of the time on both ends of the funnel. And so I think the leakage there is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that bothers me and that I'm really passionate about is that if your business feels difficult to market, air quotes to everybody listening, because nothing is difficult to market if you just think about it properly. Like, you've got to, in these spaces, we've got to give marketing teams permission to test and to play.
And to fail.
And to fail, absolutely. Like, failing, you learn as much from failing. And I feel like professional services for the longest time have felt really restricted. And I think if you're a business that's been around for a while, you know, the younger kind of challenger style type organizations that are coming in, they're tapping into that audience-led marketing. And so we can't afford to keep playing it safe. We have to give our teams permission to test and to fail, and to learn. And really, I think that learning piece is huge. Like, have a look at when was the last time you gave everyone on your marketing team or who supports you with marketing or content creation a chance to get together and to really learn something new, because it's always missing that L&D piece, and it's just so fundamental, especially because the industry is just moving quicker than ever.
Yeah. This is I've got a question here then that I think you can really help with, because I think sometimes people on this conversation are now thinking, okay, how do you then keep the customer journey adaptive and feeling fresh and it not feeling outdated? Because I think sometimes we've maybe previously done pieces of work on this kind of area where people then think 3 months down the line, you're like, that document's great, but like, and that thing we did was fab, but now XYZ's happened and this has moved on, and you're sort of sat there going, oh, does this work? How do you manage to keep it so that it does have longevity and people can be adaptive?
So the first thing, and this sounds really, really silly, but make sure that actually what you're mapping your customer journey on, you can easily edit. It sounds really silly, but it can be such a limiting thing for people because it's going to take too long to say, actually, let's test X, Y, and Z next. So make it something that is like livable. And then
would you say, sorry to interrupt, would you say that that's a core service, if just from a practical perspective for people? How would they choose what they're going to map on?
I think you've got to look at your existing tech stack, but also you've got to figure out what tools people are comfortable with using. So like, I love Miro. It's one of my favorites. But also Canva has a new whiteboard functionality. So you can have a look at what you've already got. I bet you there's something on there that is really easy for you and your team to use. So yeah, you've got to kind of make it living and breathing. And then I think the second thing is, linking back to what I said just now, it's that time to review piece. Because yes, you can feel big shifts in a market or an industry and you've got to say, oh, our strategy's got to pivot. But if you're not making time to actually review kind of every 3 to 6 months how your marketing is performing, you're making, I think you can quite easily make a knee-jerk decision about stuff. So I'd feel, that's how you keep it adaptive. You've got to have a think about kind of what your planning cycle and your review cycle looks like.
Can we talk about some myths that maybe exist around customer journey, and maybe can you bust some of those or give us some insight or some kind of relief around, because I imagine you come across through people deciding to work with you and to get support from you. I imagine you get a lot of, I wouldn't say pushback, but maybe apprehension, questions, confusion around what this actually means for them or what the output's going to be. So what would be some kind of top myths that you'd love to bust if you could?
I think the top myth is that customer journey mapping is going to take at least 6 weeks to implement, and everyone, all the business as usual is going to completely stop. And that's fundamentally not true. There is pre-work that you have to do, and I think that's a great way to approach it, is how and where do you store any reports about marketing performance or sales handovers or whatever that might be. But if you've got the right facilitator, you can map a journey in a day.
Yeah, and you do this, right?
Yeah.
So just to clarify, it's more than possible. You do it in kind of even 3 hours, right? You've done it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another thing. It's that I think there's a major myth that this stuff is really complicated to understand. And again, you can do that in 3 hours. That's what we do in our workshops service. We get together with teams and they can tell us we want to learn theory for the whole journey from start to finish, and we can do that in a 3-hour period. Or they say, actually, we're really interested in retention strategies and that part of the journey, and we can really dive into that. So, and I think that feeds into the next myth in that there's only one way to learn the stuff. And that's also fundamentally not true. One of the things that we're really passionate about, and maybe later, is helping teams figure out how they learn best and problem solve best, so that, if it's about experiential learning, if it's about learning in a particular format, all of that stuff is incredibly accessible. And don't ever let a consultant or a service provider tell you that there is only one way to learn this type of stuff. That would be a major red flag for me.
Huge. They're great, because I think the time thing is a massive off-put for people, and they're thinking, whoa.
Oh, yeah. And actually, really interestingly, a trend that I'm spotting is that people want things in an even shorter period of time. So it's, how can you deliver a talk or a workshop or anything of value in an hour? Yeah. And I think it also forces us to just make sure that we really know what we're talking about, because, and I feel like a lot of your listeners will resonate with this. So think about when you bump into someone at a networking event and you have this amazing chat and you just get to chat about all the work stuff that you really love and that you're really passionate about and good at. You can do that in an hour. And I think that's the type of energy and the type of communication that we need to bring to our services to tackle these bigger strategic projects.
And so when we look to the future, because I know you mentioned AI and emerging tech and how things are going, can you just give us a kind of your perspective on what you think that is going to mean for client journey, client mapper, and how we, I guess, look after our customers and how that all links together?
Well, so interesting. So I do fundamentally believe that we can use tech and this emerging tech to help us and to help us grow our businesses and to look after our customers in a way that we don't have to hold all of this information in our heads. But there's a big but here. You cannot over-rely on that tech. And the customer journeys and the customer experiences that stand out over the next 5 years will be the ones that understand where you need that human touch, that human magic, because that's not going to go anywhere. it's only going to become more important because it's going to become your key differentiator.
Yeah. And that client acquisition piece, I think, is this core bit of like, people need to understand what are those key factors for their business, for client acquisition, of what are their stakeholders, what are their potential clients either running towards you or pulling back from, and then using the tech to help influence that. And almost, would you say kind of, it's almost like putting rocket fuel behind it, I see it as. Like, how do we just use it to benefit us? But as you said, not become this just tick box done, put in the corner, the tech's just going to run and we're all just going to see what it spits out sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about providing like data-backed clarity. And one of the things that I find if I'm working with senior marketers or particularly founders, even now, is with the right tech and automation, they can understand who they have to reach out to today and about what point of the journey they're in, and more importantly, what they need to say to them to help them move on to that next step and to have confidence in this business partnership or the service. And it just means that you're not spending time guessing. And I think that's so incredibly powerful.
Yeah. And in terms of you and the agency that you are building and have built, have you ever had to rework your customer journey? I know we're all like always looking at what we do for ourselves and thinking, oh, have you had any moments where you thought, whoa, this actually, we've missed something here, or it's not been working, or you've had to kind of look at something?
Absolutely. Probably about 9 months ago, I was having this real moment. We use LinkedIn quite a lot, and we'd grown quite rapidly, and we'd shifted our content and my kind of personal LinkedIn content to be much more kind of brand led and quite focused, because there was this, and now upon reflection, I had this voice in my head around what an agency at this stage should be posting about and how. And people were just dropping off in a point where they didn't used to drop off before. So I went to my mirror map and had a look at what I'd changed in the last 90-day cycle. I love working in 90-day cycles. I think it tells you a lot about your sales cycle as well. And I noticed from looking at the different types of content that I map on my customer journey that my brand values piece I'd massively deprioritized, because I thought that's not what people are interested in anymore.
Isn't that wild, though?
And it was so weird, because when I was running through the auditing process, I almost thought that can't be right. And it shows you how often we make these unconscious kind of changes to our marketing. And so I flipped that on its head and massively pushed up kind of the brand value piece and who I am as a founder and how I run the business. And we watched those numbers of kind of cold leads massively increase, new inquiries from existing clients. And I wouldn't have spotted it if I couldn't see it in the context of that whole journey. If I just looked at LinkedIn, for example, some of the first places that I might have gone to would have been, what time am I posting at? Or what day of the week? Or was there an algorithm change? We've got to zoom out from channels. That can't always be the first place that we look, because I think it stops us from being wholly strategic.
Yeah, and I think strategic is that word that actually, for founders, if you do have the joy of being able to outsource, or you have an internal team that's dealing with marketing and sales, or you have an agency or you outsource it somehow, it is still, I really firmly believe, and I know you do as well, I firmly believe you strategically are still responsible for understanding what is going on, what the plan is, and where you're going. Because I think that example you shared is phenomenal, as you said, about the other directions you would have then gone to, rather than going to the customer journey map, would have led you down all sorts of paths. And you mentioned it at the start, right, about TikTok or this channel or that thing. And it's the wastage of time, resource, energy. And also, I think if you have a team, team fatigue comes into this, because if the decision making is not really effective and isn't precision led and isn't strategic, team starts to get really bored and they get really kind of like, oh, here we go again, we're doing this, we're doing that. Whereas I think this idea of actually taking it to, you know, your monthly strategy meeting or a board meeting or whatever your organization, big or small, looks like, and actually saying, hang on a minute, how do we make a decision based on something that's actually like got some legs to it, rather than we went to a conference and this is the latest thing so and so said. And I know we both have real strong views on that, but it's such a good point, that one.
What I really love about it in terms of the combating team fatigue piece is, I think that when you do journey mapping, you give your marketers, your sales team, your account managers, you give them agency, because they can all really understand where they fit in to the bigger picture and where they fit in with how they are helping the business grow, nurturing clients, and being able to, I think, really tap into and understand where, as an individual, you fit in with the business's strategy is so, so powerful, because you're motivated. You're like, I get why I'm here. Yeah. And I can see why what I do is of value.
And for CEOs listening, this connection and loop we've got to start making between all the different business functions and departments. And if talent is an issue for you and talent retention, we've got to start looking beyond benefits and kind of ways that you are holding team. And we've got to start looking at really micro zoomed in pieces, because that is a huge one. That, again, how many of us are just so busy in the day-to-day that we're not going to think of that as the first piece? And I suppose maybe when you suggest that to potential clients, I imagine they're like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that, but it sounds like a nice bonus sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's often what happens is the journey mapping project is initiated because a sales cycle has slowed down, or there's been a potential, change in the market. It's, often there's like a negative in, because there's a problem to be solved, right? And what I love about doing this work, and this is what maybe later we're talking about more and more, is flipping that on its head and saying, okay, how can we view customer journey mapping and resourcing our team to understand this and to be able to execute it as a way to break down internal silos, improve team communication, improve staff retention, shorten the sales cycle, grow revenue from existing customers. Like, that's what this piece of work helps you do. And when I think we as founders and CEOs in particular, when we can start to see marketing as a truly strategic revenue generating function within our business that we need to be proactive about, like, it will change everything.
Powerful. Just like, oh, that was just a one-liner. It was just perfect. I love that. That is so inspiring. I hope this is inspiring. I feel inspired of, like, yeah, it feels achievable, but inspiring for people. Can you just give us 2 or 3 pointers of things for people if they're like, do you know what? Okay, the next 30 days, we want more clients. We want more clients. Maybe we're going to test doing this through client journey. Can we improve our client journey, our experience? Can we do something in that space just to kind of test some of what we've been saying here? What would be those sort of like 2 or 3 things that they could practically go and do and try and see what happens for them?
If you run a business model where someone books a one-off project with you, reach out to those people and send them something really values-driven and see what that uplift is. But then I think more importantly, map or track how you're going to market to that specific group over the next 90 days.
Ooh, that's fab. Can you give us an example of what that value-driven thing might be?
I mean, it's industry specific.
Okay.
But I'm trying to.
Do you mean like a white paper?
Yeah, it could be a white paper. It could be it could even just be a really good newsletter. It doesn't always have to be something that is super resource.
Like a case study?
Yeah.
Maybe?
case study? Is there anything that's, happening in the markets or the industry right now that your clients are thinking about? And how can you help them answer that question in a quick and easy way?
That's a good task for us all to go and do.
Because where that fits in with testing some of this journey mapping stuff is you can start to see how when you target action based on where someone is in their journey with you. So in this case, an existing client who you haven't engaged with in a while, you can map that uplift and you can literally track it over a period of time, and you can see the value of it. And then another thing is go and have a look at the types of content that you share across social, across email. And I'll bet you that you're doing a lot of educational content, so stuff at the beginning of your journey. And you're probably telling people the services that you offer and to book a discovery call, whatever that call to action might be. But can you actually tally up the content that needs to be in the middle of your customer journey in terms of marketing and messaging? Can you actually tally up about whether you're talking to people about your team, your values, the behind the scenes of your offers, the really niche FAQs or questions that people ask you? Because often what we see is that piece is missing because we focus so much on the beginning and the end. So do a tally, and for the next month, test increasing that content that fits in the middle of the journey and see how your sales content performs off the back of that, because I can bet you it's going to do so much better.
Wow, what a great two tasks for us to all go and do. I love that. Thank you, Alex. That is fantastic. This has been such an informative episode. I'm hoping that people listening are feeling a bit fired up and a bit sort of excited by what could be, and maybe something that they haven't spent a lot of time looking at, going through. Just wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much for having me. Just before we go, though, I think it's also really important to, obviously, I'm such a nerd for this stuff, and I want people to really feel excited and fired up about it. But it's also okay to go, that was a lot of information. Give yourself time to percolate on all of this. Give yourself time to have a think about it and really let it sink in, because I feel like particularly as founders and CEOs, it can be easy for us to feel like, oh, this is the next thing that I need to do on my to-do list. So if you're not quite super excited yet, that's okay. Give your brain time to catch up. I think it's so important.
I love that. That's such a great anecdote there. Fabulous. Can we finish the episode on some quick fire questions? Because I know people would be very fascinated by you as a businesswoman and what you've managed to build, and you've been on a real growth journey yourself, and the business has grown a lot. So are we okay to do some quick fire questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, fab. So could you tell us what being a CEO means to you, and has that changed over time?
Ooh, it's definitely changed over time. For me, if you'd asked me this question 5 years ago, I would have told you I'm not a CEO because I don't think about accounting or cash flow projection or whatever, there's that. I had a perception in my head. And now, if you ask me, it's for me about stepping into leadership. And it's how I support my team, how I approach my work. And for me, it's all about balance and integrity.
Ooh, love it. That's just so good. When do you feel on fire in business? When do you feel at your best?
Oh, for me, it's when I'm mapping or workshopping with a team and working with people in a way where I can see I can see like this literal switch go off. It's like this light bulb moment where people go, I get this, and I can't wait to go and test it in my own business and my own team. Like that's just when I feel like most connected to my work, and I love it.
You can see your face just like lights up and you're just like, yes. If you had 2 more hours, if I could gift you 2 more hours of time every week, what would you be using that time for?
This feels like a trick question, May. My non-censored response would probably be reading a book in bed. It's probably not what you're supposed to say.
You say whatever you want.
But if I had 2 extra hours in the day, what would I do? I don't know. I think that would have to be it.
Good. I love that. Someone else said that. Rest.
Yeah,
which
rest.
I think is very interesting for everyone. And what is something that you're proud of that no one ever sees?
Ooh. For me, if I think about a business function, it's how organized my Google Drive is, which sounds really silly, but it's the type of thing where it contributes to me getting into that flow state. And I think sometimes we shy away from the boring bits in our businesses that we've built because they're not interesting to talk about. But for someone whose brain can be a little scatty, that kind of structural stuff means that I don't waste time, means that my brain doesn't get like bogged down by all of this stuff.
That's powerful. The boring,
yeah,
it's really like the boring stuff really does do it all for us.
Literally, like my Google Drive organization, my Trello board, how organized we are with kind of client onboarding and automatic of signing of contracts, and it's like that ops piece that makes stuff work.
Fabulous. Final question, if that's okay.
Of course.
If you could leave one message to, you know, every ambitious woman in business, women who maybe are quite far along or not far along, but someone who's ambitious, what would that be? Like, do you have a message for them? Do you have a thought, an idea, something for them to hold on to maybe?
Can I niche it down?
Sure, of course.
A bit. For the women who are quietly ambitious, don't let anyone tell you that it's a bad thing to chase your goals in the way that you want to. I think it's really easy to feel like there's only one way to be an ambitious woman. And when you don't fit that mold, you tell yourself, oh, well, I'm not. I'm just happy doing, this little thing here. And because I'm not, loud or overly confident, or I need lots of rest, or, whatever those stories are that we're telling ourselves, the patriarchy put them there to keep you small. And you are allowed to be quietly ambitious. And don't let anyone tell you otherwise.
I just wanted to be like, yes, keep going, keep going, keep going.
That's a whole other episode.
Whole other episode. We absolutely love that. Yeah, you're so right. Because there's not enough representation across the board of all the different versions, definitions, pieces of the pie that you can choose to be or not choose to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Fabulous. Where can people connect with you and your work and just get more Alex and maybe later in their life?
So you can find us at maybe-later.uk, and if you go on our website, you can download a free course that teaches you how to do the Align mapping method, and you'll find me on LinkedIn at Alexandra Fearon. Full name. So that's a rogue one. Search for Alex Fearon, you're going to find someone completely different. And those are the 2 main places that we hang out online.
Amazing. We'll have it all linked so people can find. But that course is like, wow, what a gift for free. It's like, whoa, incredible, amazing. Alex Fearon, thank you so much for being a guest on the Honest Business Podcast. I've so enjoyed this conversation and really think that this is going to have hopefully inspired people, got people ready to go and attack their customer journey a bit more.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, May.
No problem.